All right, here we go. We have former crew member of the Gambino crime family, Anthony Hootie Russo. Welcome to VladTV.
Thank you for the invite, Vlad.
Well, you have a very interesting story. So I want to start in the very beginning. So your mom and dad were from Sicily.
My father was I was first generation with both Sicilian parents. My mother's family was here before World War II. My father came in the 60s.
Aha. Okay. So you guys are growing up in New York. And I guess your family never even taught you Italian.
No. It was they came here, as I was told by them, like real immigrants. You're going to be American. You speak the language. You live like Americans. You respect the rules of America. And that's how my father explained it to me. And he said, when immigrants first came here, they were frowned upon. The Sicilians especially. I mean, you've heard the old stories of New Orleans, how they would just take them out to the swamps and hang them. And we got looked on worse than any other. And my father was afraid of that. And he spoke it in the house, the Sicilian dialect. You know, it's nothing like Northern Italy. It's totally different. But they never taught us it. And then, you know, my father got sick when I was young. My mother died in 91, and they just never really got a chance or got around to it.
Okay. And you grew up pretty poor.
Yeah.
Okay. What was like the worst that you kind of went through living in poverty?
The worst. Well, for a lot of years, we didn't know that we were poor. When you're a kid, you're running around the neighborhood, you eat 3 meals a day. We didn't have Doritos in our cupboards. Like, I didn't know any of this until, like, I've never really went to friends' houses when you lived like that. You know, where we lived, I lived in a walk-up tenement house. Other people lived in walk-ups. There was private homes in that area, but very rarely. So you didn't know what other people had. So until I seen that later on, then I realized that. And when I was about 10, and I was supposed to play for a traveling baseball team. I was waiting for a phone call. I tried out for the team, and my mother, father didn't know anything about it. And somehow our phone was on this month for some reason. We very rarely, our phone bill was always getting, that was like the first thing they didn't worry about paying. You know, the electric and the rent was more important, and then putting food on the table. But for some reason we had a phone, and I left that number with the coach that I tried out for the team. And the coach called, it was called the Astros. And the Sarah family owned an Astro fence company. That's what it was called. And my mother thought at 10 years old that an Astro fence company called me for a job. And I couldn't believe it. And I made the team. They said, you got it. So she thought I got a job. And I said, no, Mom, that's a baseball team, a traveling baseball team. We traveled throughout all New York City, the 5 boroughs, and we played against other cities, other neighborhoods. And she says, oh, no. Then you better go down to Astro Fence Company and ask them for a job because we can't even afford the rent anymore. And that's when it hit me. I had no idea.
Okay. What were your parents doing for a living?
My mother was a stay-at-home mom.
Ah, okay.
And, you know, cooking, cleaning. And my father was a carpenter of all trades, electrician, plumber. But he just wasn't making the wages that he should have been making. And for some reason, a couple of his brothers went to work for like local jobs, city jobs. One of my uncles was a sanitation worker. But my father could speak 3 languages, four if I remember correctly, 4 languages, but it's very hard to write in English. And he spoke broken English up until he died. And he just couldn't get on those test levels. He's very smart, math, read a ruler. You know, he could read, you know, but like something like dyslexia, but he wasn't dyslexic. So he never tried out for them. One time he did was called Urban Renewal, and the guy was doing something wrong, the trainer. And he tried to tell the guy how to do it correctly, and they asked him never to come back. So he went into business for himself, and they treated him like an immigrant.
Yeah.
You know, he didn't get paid the wages he should have been.
Okay. And you grew up in Ozone Park, which I guess is the largest Mafia area in the world?
Yeah. I grew up in a place called City Line. My family originally, you know, came from Brooklyn, and we lived, it's kind of weird how to explain it. I've said it, you know, to a few people, and some people understand it. We lived on a block called Drew Street, and one side of the block was Brooklyn, and across the street was Queens. So like I went to school in Brooklyn with all the guys that I hung out with in Brooklyn, East New York. That's the part of Brooklyn that we were. And then I had all my friends in Queens that lived across the street and a couple blocks over that went to all schools in Queens. So I kind of had like the best of both worlds because I didn't realize that it was not really that good of an area.
Okay, and I guess by 5 years old, you wanted to be a street guy.
Yeah. As soon as I was able to remember, I wanted to be a street guy.
Okay, and then I guess as a kid, there was a guy who died on your doorstep.
Yeah.
Was that a murder that happened?
Yeah, it was a guy. Joey Curio, his name was, and he was a tough kid, neighborhood kid, like, used to be out on the blocks. At this point now, we moved over. My father had a job with a bread company, he used to deliver bread, called Castelli's Bakery, which became Rosemaria's Bakery. So we moved like 2 blocks into Ozone Park. Now I'm living on 76th Street and 101st Avenue. And there was a fight between a couple Spanish guys and a couple Italian guys, and 2 of them came back and they caught this one kid, Joey, and they cut him up with machetes. And right outside my window, I lived, like I said, a walk-up tenement on top of a bakery, and he was bleeding to death at my doorstep. And I heard my mother yelling and screaming at the news reporter. I don't know if it was Connie Chung. It was definitely one of the famous news reporters. And you walk downstairs, and back then they used to leave the bodies outside because I actually seen my cousin, as my father's cousin as well, back in '87, got his back of his head blown off in another famous barbershop murder in my neighborhood. And they used to leave, and that was fresh. That was like in the middle of the night. And like by the morning, my mother and a couple other people were washing the blood off the concrete from the front of my house.
Okay, so you're growing up in this fairly poor family in an area that's mafia ridden, and I guess by 13 you start selling drugs.
Yeah. Well,
what was in the beginning?
At 5, I was trading BB guns and Chinese stars and doing blackjacks, and we used to have knives called 007s. They were big knives, like pocket knives, but really big. I mean, I was messing around with all of that stuff, dart guns, all types of like karate weapons from like 5 to 10. And then like 11, I meet up with a couple guys on the Brooklyn side, and they teach me about selling mescaline. Mescaline used to come in little pill forms, which was, I learned. I didn't even know a thing about LSD yet. Didn't have no idea. And we used to sell them for $5 a piece. He actually took me with him on a train to Harlem, 110th Street, right outside Central Park. And there used to be a guy there. We would buy 100 hits for $100. And we used to come back and move the whole 100. I would hold them. By the time I went to middle school, I was finding ways to hide them. I cut open the old school big pens. I mean, they still make them. You pull out the ink. I would cut that piece off, and since mescaline was a little pill form, I would hide them inside that pen. Keep it in my hat. I always had a Yankee hat, even going back then. Keep it in my hat, keep it in my ear. Even a couple of times I got patted down, I had it on me, and they never knew. And I would hold it for him. He'd call me over, 1, 2 hits, 3 hits. And it was like, young kids coming down from all walks of life. And we would just be selling the mescaline all weekend long, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.